Hello, everybody. I'm Ike Hecht. I work for WikiTech. I'm going to be talking about wiki dispenser bots. Before I do that, though, I wanted to, as the sponsor chair for the conference, thank all the sponsors. You make it happen, so thanks so much. Yes. And a much larger round of applause for the people who put actually the work in. My fellow chairs, in no particular order, Brian, Jeffrey, Aaron, thanks so much for all the work you put in. I know I'm technically a chair, but you guys put in the hours and the hard work. I didn't do much. They call me the sponsor chair, but I think I'm more like an armchair. Thank you so much. And yes. All right, so wiki dispenser bots. Let me hide this. Okay. Wouldn't it be great if you had a bot that was like, give me a minute and I will create a wiki? Why would you have a robot make your wiki? First of all, with a robot, you can spin up a wiki really fast. Much better, you can spin up a lot of wikis really fast. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the main reason you might... Not that I'm going to do this. If somebody does do it, I hope I'm not a suspect, but it might have been Brian or Daniel. I can't tell you for certain. But yes, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens very shortly to the pingback graphs. At WikiTech, actually, we've come a long way. One does simply create a wiki by asking a robot to create one. Here you have one of our developers, Alexei, and I should mention, I get very little credit for any of this. I'm just talking about it, but Alexei really built this bot. And I kind of knew that he was working on something related to this as a background project. I didn't know exactly where it was. And one day I was looking at our Slack and I saw Alexei write, at dispenser bot, create a wiki, please. And that's my reaction. Like, what is going on here? And then, even better, dispenser bot wrote back, hey, Alexei, you have reached your free wikis limit. Please subscribe. Just kidding. Give me a minute. And then you see Kirill sitting that and writing, bot has jokes too. And then you see only 2 minutes later, I said they work fast. Only 2 minutes later, hey, here's your wiki, have fun. Please note that the wiki will be deleted after 1 hour. We do that actually manually. We manually delete the wikis after an hour because we have to free up resources. It's hard running 40,000 wikis on the same server. So, not that I know, I'm just in theory. And you can see it generated a random subdomain to the wikitech.com domain name, and it created a wiki. But we want to have a lot more fun than that. So let's try being more specific. Dispenser bot, create a wiki, please. Enable semantic MediaWiki visual editor, replace text, nuke my variables, and the widgets extensions, and use the vector skin. Dispenser bot just takes it. Hey, Alexei, of course, give me a minute and I will create a wiki for you. And you can see this one was actually created within a minute. Here is your wiki, have fun. Please note the wiki will be deleted after 1 hour. And here you can see that's the actual wiki that was created at that subdomain. And you can see it installed vector, it installed the skins that were mentioned, the extensions that were mentioned. I don't know if we actually got all of them, and obviously there are some extensions that you can't just tell it to do. Oh, by the way, set up single sign-on with pluggable auth, and it's not going to do that. But it can, enable the extensions that you request, and as you can see, you give it some natural language specifications, and it gets it done. So what's the point? I guess sort of the point for WikiTech, like why would we want to do this? So we service a number of clients, that's what we do, and each client's single wiki actually requires many wikis. Why is that? So this comes directly from our documentation. We actually, believe it or not, we use MediaWiki for our internal documentation. Hard to imagine. It actually took us a lot of years before we actually moved to MediaWiki. I'm embarrassed to say. But we do use MediaWiki, and this comes directly from our wiki. So first wiki you need is production wiki. That's obvious. If you don't have that, I'm not sure what you're doing. Production wikis are the live versions of the wikis that our clients use. You then have the staging wiki, and those are copies of production wikis that are used for testing purposes. These wikis can be broken, removed, or recreated as necessary without needing to get the client's approval. They don't really care. And that allows us to experiment and make sure any changes we make to the production wikis will not cause any issues. It's a good idea to test before you apply to production. Good rule of thumb. And then you have the sandbox wiki, and those are intended for the clients themselves. They have access to it. They can mess around with it. They probably will mess around with it and mess everything up, and that's okay. So that's what it's there for. So now we'll do some complex math. For those of you who are following along, very simple. You have one production wiki plus one staging wiki plus one sandbox wiki. And if you total it up, you get infinity. Why do you get infinity? Well, that's why. There needs to be one staging wiki for each feature that's currently in development. You don't want people to be developing two different features on one wiki because they're going to constantly be competing each other and making each other very sad and making the code very bad. So now calculate that if you have a client with a wiki farm and try to figure out what happens when you have many clients. You have infinity times how many clients you have. As you can see, we have to create lots and lots of wikis. It would be cool if you had a robot that did it. So that's why we created this robot. And I can't tell you it's doing it right now, but it's pretty close. All right, some technical notes. If you don't like technical stuff, you can feel free to tune out, but I'm sure you all do. Pre-built MediaWiki Docker image. It does rely on Docker. We have MediaWiki, which we packed into a Docker image. And that also is orchestrated by Docker Compose. We use Docker Compose for other things also. It adds the database and the caching and other services for the wiki. That MediaWiki to Docker actually is a little more complicated. As you've heard a lot about, the MediaWiki was packaged into Canasta. Wikitech was a big part of that effort. And then Wikitech took Canasta and forked it into Canasta plus Wikitech equals Takasta. And it has an awesome logo, which I'll address immediately because I'm sure you're all interested in it. It's a fork of Canasta, not like an angry fork, and not because we abandoned Canasta, actually just the opposite. We want to build on Canasta, and that's sort of what it was intended to do, to be general purpose. So we forked it, and Takasta kind of sounds like tequila. So that's why there's a tequila bottle in the middle with a sombrero and a tequila worm at the end with a fork in its mouth. If you don't get it, I can't explain it better than that, but I think it's awesome. And Takasta actually is public, so if you'd like to see it, you can. It's basically Canasta, but customized for, let's say you had a company that serviced MediaWiki professionally, like you'd want certain features that probably aren't general use. So that's what we put into Takasta. If you're one of our competitors, feel free to take a look. This might look a little bit complicated. It's not as complicated as it looks, I hope. This is how the wikis actually get built and served to the end users, which is usually us, but also other end users. Mostly right now, what we're talking about is spinning up zillions of staging wikis. That's for testing purposes. That's what we see. But we'll see that we're going to use it for other things too. So the magic sort of follows the arrow. A user message goes from Slack, and that goes to a Python script. The script then tells the Docker Swarm cluster to deploy one of those pre-configured MediaWiki instances, known as Takasta. And once it's deployed, then the instance is served by also an awesome logo, Traefik. And Traefik routes to the incoming traffic from the visitors. So the dispenser bot has the following main parts. It's the Slack webhook, it's the Python script that's running on that VPS, and the Docker service swarm mode that deploys the predefined Docker Compose files as services. So the life cycle works like this. The user writes something on the Slack channel. The robot responds with something clever like, give me a minute and I'll get it done for you. The Slack sends the message to the script. The script then parses that user message, which we saw was in natural language, and it extracts certain tokens, the extensions, the skins, the code phrases, things like that. It sends the command to the Docker service to deploy a specific compose file. That is actually predefined, and it's the regular Docker compose file that we use to deploy any Takasta wiki. That's actually in use, that we use Takasta all the time. We also use Canesta, by the way, all the time, directly. The Docker service then deploys a wiki. The Traefik service is very cool. It detects that a new wiki was deployed, and then it starts to serve it using a subdomain. And it also runs a wildcard root domain certificate, so it has no need to issue a certificate for each new subdomain, which would be a pain. And then we have a separate cron script that runs on the domain. It finds all the stacks that are running, and if it's been running for more than an hour, it just destroys it. Of course, that's a temporary feature that we'll disable once we really start, needing long-term sandbox wikis. All right, I'll go through some of these steps in depth, but it's going to be much less technical than that was. You have the server magic API, that's the Python, reads the Slack message, understands the request, and it issues a deploy command to Docker. Then you have the Docker Swarm cluster, next step, that actually deploys the containers. It can scale it across the hardware, and it uses that Takasta image that we mentioned. We have, for the Server Magic API, we have a predefined list of extensions. You can't just pick any extension that exists on the internet. We have a predefined list, and if it matches that predefined list of extensions and skins, that it will deploy it for you. It'll send the command to Docker. The fact that Docker is running in swarm mode actually allows it to scale easily across many servers. We do plan on growing exponentially, so good to have that in place when that happens. And next we'll talk about the actual image. The image, like we said, Takasta, but it's really nothing fancy at its core. It's got something called MediaWiki, Apache plus PHP, nothing fancy, and MySQL, really a fairly standard stack for MediaWiki. The database does run as a separate service. And now that the stack is deployed, it's time for Traefik to do its thing. So once it's deployed, like we said, Traefik will discover it automatically. It'll provide HTTPS. We saw it going out to Let's Encrypt to generate that certificate and serve it. It routes the incoming traffic into the wikis. And it also manages all those subdomains, which it generates randomly. All right, so that was step one. So far, so good. We've got our robot. It's pretty clever. It'll tell you funny things. You can use natural language to control it. As it is now, I think it's great. I mean, it's a tremendous leap forward for us because, I mean, trying to deploy multiple, staging servers that met our needs. I mean, there are other tools that'll do it, that'll, deploy MediaWiki, but that met our needs. Trying to deploy that by hand was proving to be a very big problem. When, we had fewer clients, it wasn't as big a problem. But, the more clients you add, it just becomes untenable. So this is a huge step forward for us. And it's going to increase just code quality. When you have to generate those wikis by hand, you're not going to do it. And you're probably going to test your things on production. And you think it's going to be small, and everything's going to be fine. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to be right. And 1 time out of 10, it's not going to work out so well. It's not worth it. But if you can snap your fingers, write a little message in Slack, and you have a test environment, then you're going to do it. So it's a great way to encourage the developers to really fully test everything before it hits production. So it saves time for us, and it increases our code quality. We do plan on going much farther from here. So what's next? To be clear, this doesn't work, but it would be great if it did. This is a potential Slack message. Dispenser bot for all of our clients that currently run Takasta 1.35. Spin up a staging instance with the Takasta 1.39 base image and with the latest version of each of their own extensions based on each extension's compatibility policy. Run our standard test suite on each extension to make sure nothing broke. If extensions do break, spin up a separate staging environment that contains everything that works well. All right, that's what's next. I hope next year I'll actually have this as a slide and you can see Dispenser Bot's response. No promises, but it would be really cool if we can get this working. This actually is a very small part of what we want to do. And as useful as I mentioned, I think that it is. I think that there are much more useful things we could be doing and that we plan on doing. And that's this. Creating a wiki is easy. Maintaining it is hard. You create a wiki one time for each client, right? Especially when you're dealing with a production wiki. Staging wikis, of course, many times. But when you have to maintain production and you have to maintain the sandbox and other wikis, wiki farms, etc., that's not like a one-time thing. That's like every single day it has to be maintained. And you may not be changing the code base every day, but you have to monitor it and make sure that the code base doesn't have to be changed, etc. Maintaining it is a constant process. So you made your wiki, that's great, but that's a very small part of the battle. Like you need to be able to maintain it. So what we're looking to create is a sort of software as a service, but really like cloud-based, fully managed, support and maintained wiki hosting, which we kind of do, but to sort of combine all of our services into one and to have like a standard platform that can be used. And really the focus is on the maintenance, on the code updates that come easily and things like that, on the ability even for our clients to be able to snap their fingers and spin up staging instances if they want, if they have their own IT staff, or if they think they're their own IT staff, they want to spin up a staging wiki, why not? I mean, they can just snap their fingers and do it, and then it doesn't harm anything until they create 40,000. But that's their problem if they do it. So that's what we're planning, this sort of cloud-based, fully maintained wiki hosting. And I want to emphasize, not wiki hosting. We're not looking for wiki hosting. It's not our thing. We're focused on enterprise clients. A lot of the wiki hosting is focused on hobbyists, and I think it's great, and maybe we'll do it someday, but it's not close to our core business right now. So we're really looking for something that makes what we're doing now much easier and much better, which is maintenance. I think that's really our specialty. And just making sure that things work well, and that when we have to make changes, when we do development, that it's done in a professional way that's not going to break anything. What we're aiming for sounds like a contradiction, a very boring standard environment with lots of exciting customizations. Those two things sound like they can't go together, but actually they need to go together. If you don't have a very boring standard environment, then you're constantly putting out fires for everything that broke, and then you can't have exciting customizations. So they do build on each other. Slow rollout, I'm taking my time. I'm in no rush, but maybe we'll have an update next year. Who knows? We decided we're going to name this product TechWiki. It only made sense since the company is named WikiTech. It just made sense to call the product TechWiki. Just kidding. That would be an awful idea. And that's all I'll say about that. Some links for you guys. A lot of this is private, as you would imagine. That doesn't mean it's always going to be private. We do very much believe in open source. We kind of work a little bit like the federal government, like everything is classified unless you have a reason for it not to be classified. So we start everything off pretty much in a private repo. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be public. Usually it does end up being public, and certainly if any of this interests you, talk to me. And even if it does stay private, who knows, maybe you'll be able to have a wiki, at least on our cloud-based, farm, and we'll see what ends up with that. The Wiki Docker Image is public. The Python strings fuzzy matcher, we didn't actually write that code that was doing that tokenization and whatever. That is publicly available. The Slack Python SDK that creates that hook and some of the processing, that's all available. And I'm ready for questions.
I checked the pingback graphs, and there are no new spikes, but they haven't updated since April 9th, so keep looking.
It's not me. Whatever it is, it's those guys. Yes.
Yeah, I found that slide with the long natural language command very interesting. I mean, if I were implementing that sort of thing, I would just think, well, it should be a command line call with different flags or so forth. Or if you are calling it a bot, then something equivalent to that, where you have some aliases and flags for those and that sort of thing. Um, it seems like, well, it's more, maybe more foolproof to do it that way, because especially with something where it could be hard or impossible to roll it back if you type the wrong thing or if it
Right.
misinterprets it, and then of course just typing that long wall of text, if that's a standard kind of command.
Right.
I mean, potentially there's millions, but that seems like a standard kind of thing. It would be easier to just do with some kind of less natural approach. Well, yeah, what do you think about that?
Should I repeat the question, or?
I think it's coming out now. You're okay.
Okay. Yeah, so just very briefly, that really long command that I dreamed up seems like something that shouldn't be natural language. You're probably right, but it would be cool if it worked. Chances are when we create that system, it'll be run by us. It'll be with commands and everything like that. But definitely fun to experiment with, and if we can get it working, why not? Again, this is not stuff that's like changing production. It's just spinning up a ton of wikis that you can look at, and if you look at it and it doesn't look good, you can, do everything it does with ChatGPT. You just change your prompt and hope for the best.
Well, please tell me you'll put in "Are you sure?" prompt after that.
No, I can't tell you that. Any other questions? I'm not looking at Hopin, so.
I'm checking it out. And we're like on a 30-second delay right now. So.
Oh, they're after us now. Huh.
So there is a question here from Greg. Can you repeat what you said about the TLS setup via Let's Encrypt? Something about the server root certificate so that subdomains were automatically provisioned.
Yeah, instead of having a different certificate for each subdomain, we have one wildcard certificate that just gets served up by Traefik. So it's one certificate that just gets served up. I hope I understood that correctly.
Yeah.
And I didn't write the code, so I hope I answered correctly.
Yeah, like there's a wildcard certificate.
But you might want to go there too.
So, sorry, entangled cords.
There's a guy who knows much better than me what's going on.
Yeah, so there's like a wildcard certificate, so we don't dynamically have to request a lot of certificates from Let's Encrypt or whatever all the time. We can just use a new subdomain. We don't need new certificates. Traefik itself has a lot of integration into Docker, so it can very easily dynamically change routes to new Docker images and all that. And it hooks into it in a very friendly way. So essentially, we can very easily, when a new thing spins up, we don't need a new certificate because we're just using a subdomain and we have a *dart certificate, and then Traefik dynamically reconfigures and starts routing traffic to the thing. All very automatic. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, he actually, as soon as you said one word wildcard, he got it.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Okay. And chances are, I assume that once we start doing this for clients, especially if they can generate them themselves, we'll have a wildcard certificate for their domain instead of ours.
Any questions from the room?
Thank you.
Thank you.